Thank you, Brian. Good afternoon, everyone. I can't see you for the lights, but yes, you're there. I am going to take a similar amount of time from Brian to describe the International Advisory Committee of the IMFN Secretariat. It's really important for you to be aware of both these committees because they are there to serve your interests, but they do have very different functions. And 3 points on the International Advisory Council that are important to know is that it's a creation of the Secretariat. It is an advisory council to the Secretariat, not the network, although it is in the network's interest that we have convened it. So it is a bit different from the networking committee in that respect. It's comprised of senior international forestry experts, one of whom is seated here, Hosni Alakani. I'll go through the other members shortly, who are invited by the IMFN Secretariat and who agreed to provide advice on high-level strategic matters concerning the network's development. And it's a body that meets at the discretion of the chair. And the chair of the IMFN Secretariat is the head of the Canadian Forest Service, who currently is Tom Rosser. The IAC has met twice, once in October 2007, second time in Rome on the margins of the FAO Committee on Forestry meeting in March 2009. These are the current members, and as you'll see in looking through the list, they are quite highly, they are senior leaders. They are from varied disciplines within the natural resource sector. In all cases, they are people who have a track record of getting the job done, who are well connected, who are thinkers, and who we wanted to attract to this initiative as people who have historically been outside of the model forest world, and have them take a fresh look at what we're doing with a critical eye, and pose the questions, for example, what does this look like to you? Does it look credible? Are we achieving what we think we're achieving? Do we have the proof? How can we improve what we're doing? How can we get recognition at a higher and more important level? So those are the sorts of questions we wanted to pose, and it's important to underline the fact that these are people who have no vested interest in this initiative, except as an idea that they think has some merit. And in that way, we wanted people who did two things. One, they would give us that critical, hard look and maybe give us news that we didn't really want to hear. And the second thing is because they're all senior level people, they're very comfortable bossing people around, right? Okay. Okay. So we did, the last meeting was in Rome in 2009. And the meeting there was to discuss and update the status of the IMFN, and secondly, to look specifically at the question of internationalizing the IMFN. And this is an issue that I think is less important for reasons that I'll hopefully demonstrate shortly. But at the time, the IMFN was significantly invisible to some of the people we wanted it to be visible to. And we needed some advice on how do we find our niche, how do we get that visibility so that people are aware of what we're doing, so it's supported more strongly, and so that the successes that you are achieving can be communicated to an important international policy audience. So what follows here are a set of observations and some recommendations that came out of that meeting, including actions that we took as a Secretariat based on the recommendations. It's not comprehensive. As you might expect with a group like this, with a full day of meeting, there were a lot of thoughts, a lot of ideas, a lot of recommendations, and I've captured what I think are some of the ones that will be important for you to register. Among the key observations are the following four. The first one is that the IMFN must identify and occupy its international niche based upon a clear understanding of the specific value that the initiative brings to global efforts in support of SFM. Right. And I think it was a fair observation because we advertised ourselves as a bit of all things to all people. We were very successful here, but we were also successful there. The question was, what exactly is it you do? And it's not fair to tell an audience you do everything. It's not going to get it far. The second point, the Secretariat the organization I represent, was seen as by the IAC as the engine that would drive the initiative forward internationally, give it direction, advocate on behalf of members and to external audiences and interests. And I think this is a fair observation, but it's an important one to underline, which is the Secretariat is in a privileged position because it's connected to all the pieces of this network to work on your behalf. And so I think this is, in some senses, it's obvious, but to the same extent, it needs to be reinforced because that is how we understand our role. And it's important for us to know that you appreciate that and whether or not you agree with it or whether you think that there are additional things or if there's too much. Connected to that, the third bullet, the Secretariat is seen as being the best place to provide brokering services, mapping opportunities for members, and leading on strategic initiatives. And again, I think this is a reflection of the privileged position that the Secretariat has as a hub of all of the parts of the network. And finally, this is one that is important for the members, which is when we were looking at the question of niche and what does the model force do or what is the value it adds, this is something for you to ponder, which is an observation was made that the chief product or value added of the model forest network is the model itself. And following from that, you could conclude that a key responsibility of members, that is at the site level, is to support and demonstrate the model, which is if you're successful in having a model forest and a partnership and doing all these things, those projects certainly are successes and they serve your members' interests. But in terms of the global initiative, what we want to see is that the model itself is the vehicle of change, and that's a key product, I would argue. So I have 4 recommendations that I drew from the 2009 meeting that I wanted to bring forward. One is, it was observed that the goals and objectives of the network have not changed since the initiative was launched. As a Secretariat in 1995, they said, should this be reconsidered? Should we review it, update it, confirm it? And those of you who've reviewed the draft IMFN Charter know that these objectives and goals are identified in there. So they are subject now to debate, reconsideration, if that's what the members wish. The second recommendation was that the network needs to align itself with international sustainable forest management efforts in ways that generate profile, which I just referenced, and bring benefit to you, the members. I have a list here of some of the things that we've done. I'm not going to read it in the interest of time, but I'll highlight a couple, which are the side events that we did at the World Forestry Congress in Buenos Aires. The fact that we've updated and spent time broadcasting these things on our website. It was mentioned we had some very good high-profile time at UNFF9 and the launch of the International Year of Forests in February of this year. And certainly, I would say that the symposium that we just completed is a fairly high-level international way that allowed us to connect with partners. So these are deliberate things that serve the broader interests of sustainable forest management, but certainly that carry the IMFN forward as well. Chimère had mentioned that through the Africa Model Forest Network, there's now work with alignment with the Congo Basin Forest Partnership and COMIFAC. There are others, but again, here's the Secretariat. What it wants to do is get out there and on your behalf, be in international fora, international discussions, so that we can profile what you're doing. Third recommendation is to state more clearly what the Secretariat is and what it does, as well as what it does not do. And we've done this in our documentation. We perhaps need to do further work on this. It's described in the draft charter, so again, it's subject to your review for our discussion and for some clear final descriptions. I'm going to be speaking a little bit later for just a couple of minutes on the role of the Secretariat, and it's important that this be made clear, and also regional roles and so forth, because we have so many new members. Members who, unlike Brian and myself and a small number of you in the audience, have no historical memory of this event because you weren't here. So there are assumptions made by new members based on different things, and so as we grow, it's incumbent upon us to take the time to refresh the historical record and to be clear about roles, responsibilities, who does what, and why they do them, and so forth. And finally, the Secretariat will create documentation that specifically outlines the benefits and responsibilities of the network, including rules governing membership, and make this known. And so, again, I refer to the charter that's going to be discussed this afternoon, but also to some specific work we've done in our publications and online. But I would also say that maybe a chief way that we have been demonstrating this is in the relationship we have with the sites and the relationship we have with regional secretariats. So we have a significant amount of precedent, a good track record of excellent relationships at all levels, and I think a fairly clear division of who does what and why and so forth. But again, as the network grows, as others are looking in and saying, do I want to be part of that, we have to be very clear in our documentation that it is in fact clear, that people know what they're going to get into, and they know their responsibilities, and they understand benefits. And that is my summary of the IAC. I thank you for your attention.